This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Paul Graney, sitting in for Tiffany Meyer. Tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East after Iran launches nearly 200 missiles at Israel. Israel's air defense systems intercepted many of them, while Israeli citizens took cover. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
On Tuesday, Israel was on high alert as they said an Iranian missile attack was imminent. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told residents to make sure they follow the relevant safety instructions.
I ask you for two things. One, to strictly obey the directives of the Home Front Command. It saves lives. And second, to stand together. We will stand firm together in the testing days ahead.
And soon after, missiles were seen in the air over Jordan, which were fired towards Israel. Onlookers appeared to clap their hands in support of the launch. And in Israel, sirens could be heard as missiles were seen over Tel Aviv and as Israel's air defense systems intercepted them. And over Jerusalem as well, several missiles were intercepted in the sky. President Biden directed the U.S. military to help Israel defend itself against Iranian attacks and to shoot down missiles targeting Israel. Israeli forces gave an update after the attack.
As we can see, a few hits with no casualties because of the responsible behavior of the public. Them listening to instructions and the operating of our defense systems, as well as the activity of our partners for the protection of the citizens of Israel.
This is the second time Iran has launched a barrage of projectiles at Israel this year. The first time was in April when Iran launched missiles and drones at Israel, most of which were intercepted, according to Israeli forces. Iran's supreme leader is currently in a secure location, according to Reuters, citing a senior Iranian official. And many are wondering how Israel will respond to this latest attack. Israel said that attack will have consequences and that they have plans and will act at a place and time of their choosing. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Multiple departments of the U.S. government are now responding to Iran's attack, including comments about possible consequences for the regime. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the reactions.
Of course, there must be consequences for Iran for this attack.
The State Department on Tuesday saying it's in touch with Israel to plan a possible response after Tuesday's attack. Iran launched almost 200 missiles towards central and southern Israel.
We've made clear that there must be consequences. I'm not going to get into what those consequences are today, but there are things on which we will be coordinating with our Israeli counterparts.
Although Iran launched a huge barrage of rockets, no casualties have been confirmed. Some reports say a Palestinian man in the West Bank died, but the U.S. did not confirm those reports. The White House says the U.S. helped Israel to mitigate the impact of the attack.
U.S. naval destroyers joined Israeli air defense units in firing interceptors to shoot down inbound missiles. President Biden and Vice President Harris monitored the attack and the response from the White House Situation Room.
According to the Pentagon, the two ships fired around a dozen interceptors. The Pentagon also sent a warning to Iran.
To be crystal clear, as Secretary Austin has said, should Iran, its partners, or its proxies use this moment to target American personnel or interests in the region, the United States will take every necessary measure to defend our people.
But he added that as of right now, the U.S. is not planning to evacuate American citizens in the area. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And tonight, vice presidential candidates Tim Walz and J.D. Vance will debate right here in New York City. Tune in for the CBS News vice presidential debate tonight, starting 9 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS or simulcast on NTD. NTD will also have on-the-ground coverage, in-depth analysis, and a lot more during a pre- and post-debate show presented by Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer. So don't miss our coverage starting tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on NTD.
For the first time in almost 3 decades, both vice presidential candidates are veterans, and both have served or are serving in Congress. Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance have been baiting each other for weeks over Tuesday's debate.
I absolutely want to debate Tim Walz.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level.
House Majority Whip and Congressman Tom Emmer from Minnesota has been helping J.D. Vance prepare for his debate, stepping in the role of Tim Walz during prep sessions.
When people focus on the issues, and the issues are very clear for the American people, Donald Trump had a great economy, lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. I think it was half a century. He had families making $6,000 more in wages over the course of his tenure in his first term.
On the Democratic side, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg is stepping in as J.D. Vance during Governor Tim Walz's debate prep sessions. One of the issues Walz is expected to prepare for is to have his military record put on the spotlight. Republicans accuse Governor Walz of misrepresenting his service and highlight that he retired from service just before his unit was sent into combat.
Well, look, so here's Governor Walz, who enlisted. He signed up for the National Guard when he was 17. He served for 24 years. What I would expect him to say is that he's proud of his service, and he has continued to serve the country in all the ways that he can. And I mean, meanwhile, you've got Donald Trump showing up at Arlington Cemetery and desecrating hallowed ground. So I don't think that they have a leg to stand on when it comes to accusing Tim Walz of anything.
Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance will face off in New York City during a 90-minute debate. It is expected that over 50 million people will tune in to watch both vice presidential candidates. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
So do voters plan on watching the debate with an open mind? NTD's Sam Wong was out at the National Mall to hear from them.
Do you plan on watching the debate tonight with an open mind?
I do. I'd like to see if they have something substantive to say that I haven't already thought I understood.
I've made up my mind.
I've already made up my mind.
I'm interested in a good debate. I've probably made up my mind.
I think my mind is made up, but I will go into it with an open mind and give each candidate their fair share.
I've already made up my mind as far as if I will be voting and who I will be voting for.
I have an open mind in terms of if they're going to address things that pertain to us as a people and where we're headed as a nation.
What are some of the top issues you hope the candidates to address tonight?
Well, economy, the border, those are the two big ones.
I would like to see them clarify their personal stance on some of the critical policies that we're facing.
They need to start addressing unforeseen medical debt that Americans are facing and not having that hit their credit reports and impacting their financial livelihoods.
Well, I think that something that both sides agree with is there needs to be better control of our borders. The other thing that I'm looking for is, again, just bring some decency back to, our country.
Our place in what we're doing with the world, the conflicts that are going on in the world, whether or not we're going to support them, not support them.
With the escalation of Iran today, do we really want to get, our son also serves. We're worried about getting drawn into more of a conflict there as well.
Work on Social Security, help out the unions a little more, get people back to work a little bit.
Abortion is a scourge, it's a Holocaust. It is a huge issue and it does need to be addressed. The VPs need to address it, the presidential candidates need to address it.
So as tensions drastically escalate in the Middle East, former President Trump warns of a global catastrophe while speaking in Wisconsin today. Comes amid intelligence that Iran could be spotting to assassinate him. NTD's Iris Tao has more from Milwaukee.
Campaigning in the Battleground state of Wisconsin today, former President Trump will be soon talking to the press here in Milwaukee. Earlier today, in an economic speech in nearby Walkeny, Trump responded to the latest Iranian missile attack on Israel by saying it would have never happened if he were the president, while warning of a global catastrophe. Watch.
As you know, the world right now is spiraling out of control. I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe, but nobody knows what's going on.
Trump vowed to restore peace if he returns to the White House. Trump also criticized the Afghanistan withdrawal and attributed the latest Iranian attack to what he called a lack of respect in the U.S. by other countries. And earlier in the statement on the attacks, Trump also cited intelligence suggesting that Iran might be trying to assassinate him and saying that Iran does not want him to win because they want to take advantage of America. It all comes as Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz will be facing off tonight in the CBS VP debate and what could be the last debate in this election cycle. Foreign policy is expected to be in the spotlight tonight on the stage. Reporting from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Vice President Kamala Harris will survey the damage from Hurricane Helene in Georgia on Wednesday. Her campaign says Harris will also give updates on federal emergency efforts in the ongoing crisis. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
Vice President Kamala Harris's office announced that Harris has plans to be in Georgia to receive an on-the-ground briefing about the continued recovery efforts that are occurring in communities across the state. Her office says Harris will also provide updates on federal actions that are being taken to support emergency response and recovery efforts in Georgia and several other states throughout the Southeast. On Monday, Harris gave remarks at FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C.
We will continue to do everything we can to help you recover and to help you rebuild, no matter how long it takes.
President Biden is scheduled to visit North and South Carolina on Wednesday. His office said he'll survey damage from Helene and meet with first responders. And a White House official said that Harris also plans to go to North Carolina in the coming days. And former President Trump visited Georgia on Monday.
I'd like to now ask for a moment of silence and prayer, if you would, for those who have died.
Trump said he's been working with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk to get Starlink internet service set up in areas affected by Hurricane Helene so people can have a means of communication. Helene has affected multiple states in the southeast. Close to 150 people have been confirmed dead so far. Millions are without power and many families have been devastated by heavy flooding. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And now we have an on-the-ground update on where some key voters stand as the nation heads into November. Here's NTD's Kevin Hogan reporting from a Battleground county just outside Philadelphia.
Yes, Tiff, I'm here in Levittown, Lower Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which some residents, I was just speaking to a few of them in the shopping center over there, tell me that this is Trump country. A lot of blue-collar workers here, a contrast to Upper Bucks County, which they say is more affluent and has a lot of Harris supporters. Bucks County has voted blue since '92 in presidential races, but there are a lot of swing voters here, which makes this a key battleground in the big swing state prize of Pennsylvania. Top of mind for voters here, the economy, immigration, and foreign policy. Here's what they told me.
Well, none, actually. Trump says no. Harris says bring him in, but we have no plans of what to do. We have no accommodations where we're bringing in, the migrants. Nothing against Harris, but I don't think she's experienced enough to actually, how can I say this, go up against world leaders.
She's been in with Biden for 4 years. The economy has not gotten any better. It's only gotten worse. And in my personal opinion, I just don't trust her to run the government the way that it should be run.
One thing I like about Trump is he's respected all around the world. I've watched him in Saudi Arabia, in China, in England. The way he's treated there, they respect him. This country is respected around the world. When he was running the show, gas was under $2 a gallon here. And you were safer, the big cities were safer, law enforcement respected him.
I'm not interested in personality, I'm interested in policy. I don't care what Donald Trump does personally, that's none of my business. I knew he wasn't an altar boy when I voted for him. But he's the best president, he had a wonderful foreign policy, stay out of wars. And that's, I think, what most people want.
In addition, some voters here say that former President Trump puts America first, and they like that. However, other voters say that the Biden-Harris administration did better with COVID, and they are very happy with that record low unemployment rate that we're seeing in this country right now.
And former President Jimmy Carter is about to make history today. It's his 100th birthday, making him the first president in U.S. history to hit the centennial mark. A number of events to celebrate are in the works, including a flyover of military jets over his hometown, Plains, Georgia, where a naturalization ceremony and a concert will be held. His family members say Carter's birthday wish is to vote in this year's presidential election. Ukrainian officials say that at least 6 people are dead after a Russian attack on the Kherson today. That's as Ukraine is having difficulty making gains in various fronts. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the update on Ukraine.
Video released on Tuesday shows a damaged building with a fire burning inside. Regional authorities in Ukraine's Kherson says 6 people were killed during a Russian attack. And another 6 people are wounded in the attack on a central bus stop. Meanwhile, in the Donetsk region, Russia says its troops have captured another settlement, saying it shot down multiple Ukrainian rockets and drones. And in Russia's Kursk region, over the past 24 hours, Russian troops repelled 5 attempts by Ukraine to break through the front lines. The Ukrainian military reportedly lost more than 350 servicemen during the attempts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy acknowledged the difficulties.
The situation is very challenging. The most important thing is to put pressure on Russia using all available means.
And NATO officially has a new Secretary General. Former NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg passed the gavel to his successor, Mark Rutte, who is a former Dutch prime minister. The new NATO chief says it's crucial for the alliance to keep supporting Ukraine. He also suggested that China aiding Russia should have consequences.
China cannot continue to fuel the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War without this impacting its interests and reputation.
Zelenskyy has been asking allies to be able to use long-range weapons against Russia. Rutte says it's up to each individual NATO member to make that decision. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The big port strike begins. Nearly 50,000 dock workers have taken to the picket lines, choking off America's imports and exports along the East and Gulf coasts. Here's the story.
Over 50,000 port workers along East and Gulf Coast ports are on strike. From Baltimore to Houston to Philadelphia.
During COVID, they ripped off the whole industry, they ripped the government off and every damn body else during COVID, okay? Now, we want them to pay back.
The strike may cost the U.S. billions per day. The longer it lasts, the more Americans will see empty store shelves and higher prices. Companies are scrambling to find alternative supply routes.
It's challenging. And the cargo coming from Asia, you have a natural alternative routing with the West Coast. We'll see West Coast congestion. We'll see rail and trucking delays on the land side.
Michael Cleggy helps businesses move their goods in and out of the U.S. He says many clients have stockpiled inventory to last several weeks. Others are finding alternative routes.
Cargo coming from Europe across the Atlantic, there's really very limited alternatives. We'll quickly see major backups and lack of capacity for the cargo that's coming out of Europe.
The port workers want a 61.5% wage increase and a ban on automated equipment.
They're on call 24/7. They do not even get Christmas off. So, I'm not surprised.
Jasmine Blumhoff's husband is a West Coast port worker. He isn't part of the strike, but all dock workers understand why the strike is happening.
They are really working around the clock, and they never take a day off. We can't survive without oil and gas and lumber and all of the goods that come through the ports.
Harold Daggett, the head of the International Longshoremen's Association, says the union is willing to strike for months. The White House is pushing the two sides to come to an agreement.
Rescue efforts continue today in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, which has devastated the southeast. The storm has claimed over 100 lives, destroyed numerous homes, and left millions of people without power or communication. NTD's Christina Corona brings us the latest.
At least 143 people have lost their lives due to Hurricane Helene, including 5 first responders and a canine officer, according to multiple agencies across the Southeast. President Biden held a cabinet meeting to discuss recovery efforts across his administration in the wake of Helene's damage.
I've been in frequent contact with the governors and other leaders in the impacted areas. And we have to jumpstart this recovery process. People are scared to death. People wonder whether they're going to make it. We still haven't heard from a whole lot of people. This is urgent.
Hundreds of people remain unaccounted for in North Carolina as the state grapples with the aftermath of Helene. Governor Roy Cooper provided an update on the current situation.
Our emergency responders are continuing to rescue people and rush aid to the mountains. The challenges are immense, but our joint response effort has and will continue to be massive. No matter who or where you are in Western North Carolina, if you need help, we are working around the clock to reach you.
Hundreds of roads, particularly in the Carolinas, remain closed, complicating the delivery of much-needed supplies. In some areas, access is so limited that supplies are being delivered by air and mules. A total of 3,500 federal personnel have been deployed across the U.S. to assist in the response to Hurricane Helene. During a Tuesday briefing, the White House reported,
FEMA has shipped 7.1 million meals ready to eat, more than 7.5 million liters of water, 150 generators, and over 95,000 tarps, nearly 1,300 urban search and rescue personnel on the ground. The Department of Defense has 30 high water trucks and 22 helicopters.
Over 1.5 million people were still without power across the Southeast on Tuesday morning, with the majority in South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, according to PowerOutage.us.
We are working with the private communications companies as well as the FCC to ensure that we can rebuild communication towers. We have, for example, deployed 50 Starlink satellite systems to help with the reconstruction of that infrastructure.
In Florida, the Gulf Coast has suffered extensive damage, with flooded roads and downed trees throughout the area. Officials report that 90% of the homes in Keaton Beach, Florida, have been completely destroyed due to the severe storm surge and powerful winds that battered the coastline. President Biden is planning to visit Raleigh, North Carolina on Wednesday to assess the damage, followed by trips to Georgia and Florida. On the same day, Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Augusta, Georgia, and then head to North Carolina in the coming days. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Aaron Smith, his wife, and 2 young sons have been left homeless in the aftermath of the hurricane. The family says they have nothing to go back to and now face an uncertain future. Here's their story.
The Smiths are one of many families in North Carolina that have been left homeless in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Flooding caused by the storm caused the creek behind their home to rise into a torrent, sending a boulder through a bedroom wall and demolishing 3 of the 4 walls of their house. Aaron, his wife, and their 2 sons were able to escape with a single suitcase, but they aren't sure when they'll be able to return to their tiny hamlet of Bat Cave.
There's nothing left. The firefighters are telling us it's going to be at least 6 months before we see our house again. And frankly, I doubt very much that it'll be that fast.
During the storm, the nearby Broad River rose to levels never seen before, washed away homes, and broke through the town's bridge. Scientists describe the devastation in the region as a 1,000-year event.
When it comes to where we're going to go from here, I guess anywhere but here. I don't see anything to go back to. We left our cars, of course. We have one suitcase, really, and so trying to figure out four people and a dog out of one suitcase. It's just surreal.
And joining us now to discuss an eventful day is Bart Marcois, former U.S. diplomat and presidential campaign advisor. Bart, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Bart, a lot to talk about today. Let's start with the VP debate coming up in just a few hours. In your political circles, is there hype around this one?
No, not really. I hear hype in the media. I hear the media kind of promoting this narrative that Tim Walz is nervous. He doesn't want to let Kamala Harris down. He feels like he's not a good debater, and nobody's really buying that story. He's a fine debater. He was in Congress for 8 years, I don't remember, and he's been a governor. He's had plenty of experience. He's quite comfortable in front of a camera. I think his performance will be fine. It will be technically fine. He has a couple of drawbacks that will harm him, hold him down. But nobody is expecting any bombshells from tonight.
The presidential debate between Harris and Trump was pretty well watched. The high viewership. You don't think this one's going to be similar?
I doubt it. That one got, 76 million people? If this one gets 40 million, that would be, really good. I think it will probably be around 30 million, I would guess. But this is this is really a debut for Tim Walz. People are familiar with J.D. Vance now. They know who he is. They've read his book. They've seen him burst onto the scene, and he's kind of a steady, known character. Tim Walz is a little unsure. I think that he will impress people with his abilities, but the drawbacks I referred to earlier are that he's going to have to advocate for a campaign that doesn't really have a policy platform outlined yet, and that's going to be hard to overcome. And it'll be interesting to see whether J.D. Vance brings up Walz's connections with communist China. Those are troubling to a lot of people, and some of his more unusual stances that he's taken in the past.
And on policy, do you see foreign policy getting more focused this evening, given what we saw in Israel today?
I think so. I think that Walz will be on the defensive and Vance will be on the attack there. Vance is going to be able to ask people, have you had enough yet? Have you had enough of this yet, of the chaos and the wars and the inflation and everything and the instability? Now there's another major war, could be the biggest one of them all, about to break out in the Middle East. And he will pin this on the Biden-Harris administration and say, look, if they had not lifted sanctions against Iran the first day almost that they came into office, and if they had not continued to lift sanctions against Iranian individuals, entities, and surrogates, none of this would have happened. And Walz will have very little to say in defense of himself or in defense of the ticket. So I don't think Vance will be able to pass up an effective attack line like that.
Now, we often talk about an October surprise. You take your pick today. We saw a major port strike beginning just this morning. How difficult is that one for the Biden administration to navigate so close to the election?
When my first reaction when I saw it was, oh boy, this is really going to put the nail in the coffin for the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris-Walz campaign. But I heard commentators today suggest that, pointing out that the longshoremen have they're longtime allies of the Biden family and the Biden administration, and they're part of the AFL-CIO, who not only endorsed Joe Biden but they played a significant role in some of the anomalies of the 2020 election. And these commentators were pointing out, they said, look, if Biden said, I'm going to turn this over to Vice President Harris and let her sort it, and if it magically got sorted within a week or 10 days, it would be a real feather in her cap to accomplish that. And they were suggesting that the whole thing was a setup. I don't believe that. I don't believe it was. I think the longshoremen actually have a legitimate case to make, and this is when their contract expired, and they're pressing their case. They say they're only making $30 an hour. That's hard for me to believe when people who work at Trader Joe's make $25 an hour if they're in California. And so they have a legitimate case that they need more money, but are they really going to shut down the half of the entire U.S. economy for it? I don't know.
Well, that's one to watch, because if they don't swoop in and save this soon, I think the headlines only reflect poorly or put pressure, at least, on the current administration. So that's one we'll watch. Bart, before we go on, I want to get your thoughts on a recent Gallup poll. It shows for the first time in decades, more Americans are identifying as Republicans than they are as Democrats. That's quite the report on the run-up to the election.
It is, because in previous elections, when Republican presidents have won, they have been down 3 points and 4 points and 7 points in that same Gallup poll conducted in the same way. And now it's showing, if I remember right, it's showing Republicans up over 3 points. And it suggests that there's a possibility of a runaway for Donald Trump in the popular vote as well as the Electoral College, and that it will lift a lot of the Senate and House campaigns as well. It's an extraordinary figure.
And Bart, we hear President Trump talking a little bit about, former President Trump talking a little bit about what's happening in the Middle East. Where do you see U.S. involvement going from here?
I think the U.S. would be wise to simply stand as far off of it as possible. They should absolutely resupply our ally, Israel. We should make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself. I think it's entirely appropriate that we are helping to shoot down the ballistic missiles that Iran is sending. This is an act of naked aggression by a power that's about to become a nuclear power. And we have done nothing except enable Iranian power. We've done nothing to curb Iranian power. We're leaving it up to the Israelis to do it. We need to support them, but we should not put troops on the ground.
Well, we had a commentator come on our show earlier this afternoon, and they said that this has now turned into an existential issue for both Israel and Iran. How do you weigh up that assessment?
I would agree that it is existential for Israel, for the nation of Israel and the people of Israel. I do not agree that it's existential for Iran. It's existential for the Iranian leadership, for the mullahs who govern Iran. We saw what Israel did to Hezbollah over the last week and a half, in an absolutely tactically and strategically brilliant campaign going back 6 years in preparation. One has to wonder whether they have something similar set up for the Iranian leadership. The people of Israel have historically good relations with the Persians. If you go back the length of memories in the Middle East, which run thousands of years, it is the Islamic ideology, the Islamist ideology, the Ayatollahs. It's their campaign of hatred and their desire to extinguish every last Israeli, and frankly, every last Jew in the world. That's what the Israelis are fighting against. And if they can take out that leadership, they would be giving liberty to the people of Iran to finally have a true democracy and finally choose the kind of leadership they'd like.
Yeah, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu reminding the people in Iran of this historic relationship between the Jews and the Persians. It's definitely one to watch. Bart Marcois, thank you, Bart.
Thank you.
And welcome back. Just in time for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, great to see you as always.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here.
Dave, we'll start with the baseball playoffs. Just started today. We had Detroit playing Houston. We're already on the third game. Well, how's it going?
Yeah, Detroit won game one. That was the first game, 3-1. Now, any round this any win this round, very big. This is best of 3, so the first team win 2, they advance. Now, the Tigers, they started Tariq Skubal, the likely AL Cy Young winner. I mean, it has to be him. He led the league in wins, ERA, and strikeouts. He was dominant today, 6 shutout innings, allowed just 4 hits, no runs, all of them were singles. The Tigers, meanwhile, they did have to hang on, but they won 3-1. Second game, Royals beat Baltimore, actually just finished a couple seconds ago, 1-0, a real pitcher's duel. Bobby Witt Jr., who's probably going to finish runner-up in the MVP award, he had the only RBI of the game in the 6th inning. Royals had to hold on there in the 9th inning to take that game. Now, there's a third game that's going on right now. The Mets are leading the Brewers 3-2, last I saw, after 3 innings. Then we've got tonight, we've got the Mets versus the Padres. I'm sorry, the Braves versus the Padres. So busy day in baseball.
Dave, the look in your eyes, I have a feeling you're a little bit torn about this evening whether to watch the debate or the baseball. Let's wait and see what you actually go for.
It's tough, all right?
Remember, you're going to be reporting on the debate tonight, so don't get too distracted.
I can multitask, all right?
Okay, good. Hey, let's talk about the playoff rosters. A couple of big names admitted, Justin Verlander of Houston and Chris Sale of Atlanta. What is the status with those players?
Yeah, Sale, I mean, he's injured. He's had back spasms recently. He was supposed to pitch yesterday in that crucial doubleheader. They just scratched him because he still had those back spasms going on. He hasn't pitched since September 19. Now, on that day, they noticed his fastball velocity had dipped down to 93 miles an hour. Normally it's around 96. So the back problems are affecting him. Now, he's the probable Cy Young winner in the National League, so it's a big loss right now. Now, Verlander, meanwhile, for Houston, he's 41. He's won 3 Cy Youngs himself, but he missed 2 months this summer with a neck discomfort, they called it. I haven't seen that injury, but that's what it was, and he has not quite been his same self since he returned. He had a rough September. Anyway, this is best of 3, so you only need 3 starting pitchers. So that may be part of the reason that he has been omitted, but he could be back for the next round, which is going to start this weekend.
Neck discomfort. I get a little bit of that after working too hard. Might need to take it easy. Now, Dave, I don't want to stop on a sad note today. Pete Rose passed away at 83. How are baseball fans thinking about this?
You know, Rose was very popular, known as Charlie Hustle. He ran to first base even on a walk, slid in head first into every base, and you watch out if you were a catcher, because he was if you were blocking the plate, he was coming right for you to try to hit you to just jar the ball loose. He was from the old school. Now, as a hitter, one of the best ever, 4,256 hits, most in baseball history. I mean, just getting to 3,000, a very rare company. Only 33 players in the 150-year history of the game even got to 3,000. So that's how good that was. He was MVP in '73, won 3 World Series titles. Now, he became a player manager at the end of his career, and then just a manager after he retired as a player. But soon after, he was banned from the game for gambling on baseball games, though he denied it at first. Years later, he did admit it in an autobiography. But part of his lifetime banishment was he was ineligible for the Hall of Fame, which a lot of us fans, myself included, thought was a little too much. Maybe they will add him in posthumously. We'll have to find out.
In a word, do you think they're going to add him?
Yes, I do.
There you go. Dave Martin, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
And thanks for tuning in this evening. I'm Paul Greeny. Good night.